Let's take a look at the strength and conditioning routine of a UFC world champion, Alexander Volkanovski. This man, by its purest definition, is a physical freak. If you watch his fights, he puts on a ridiculous pace on his opponents, and he does this to endurance freaks such as Max Holloway, or take his fight against Islam Makhachev, who is known for having freakish strength in the grappling department, like he had a hard time taking Alexander down, and Alex could hold on his own against him. In an interview with Joe Rogan, he stated that sometimes he feels more anxious about his strength and conditioning sessions than his UFC fights, like the fights themselves. Alex stands at about 5'6", which is 168 centimeters, and prior to his MMA career, he was a rugby player. And get this, during his rugby career, it was rumored that he weighed at 214 pounds, which is close to 100 kilograms at that height. Now, rugby players are known for being physical freaks. If you don't believe me, just look up a YouTube video right now of rugby players doing strength training and conditioning training, and you will see what they are capable of doing. So this means that before he started MMA, he was probably already a physical freak. And all of this got me excited to take a look at his strength and conditioning routine out of all of the available footage that I can find. So let's take a look at that together, and I as a strength and conditioning coach will give my assessment to the exercises he's doing and probably why he's doing them, so you can understand the purpose behind them. Here you can see he's doing a variation of the bench press, but he's throwing the weight. This is called a ballistic bench press, which means that you don't stop at the end, you keep throwing the weight so it accelerates further. This is done for power development, and you do not use a very heavy weight. It needs to be light enough so that you can use maximal speed and accelerate the weight as fast and high as possible. Power exercises are different from strength exercises in that they use a lighter weight, but you use maximal speed. This is to train your brain to recruit more motor neurons and develop power. Here we can see him doing some plyometrics, some standard hurdle jumps, and he gives his absolute full effort into each jump, because plyometric exercise requires that. You need to go 100% into each jump once again to develop this explosive power, to train your brain to recruit more motor units. And look at this landing phase. He is thinking especially of landing correctly here, because that is a big requirement of plyometrics. Lateral bounce here, he jumps laterally to develop power in a lateral direction. In MMA, you will need to express power in a multitude of different directions, and this is just power development in the lateral plane of motion. Here we can see him doing some various medicine ball exercises, and the medicine ball is an amazing tool for power development. It is a subcategory of ballistic training once again, because you want to accelerate an object and use your fullest range of motion possible. And medicine balls can be used to develop power in all major planes of movement, whether that is pushing or hip rotation, slams, triple extension, all planes of movements for power development. Here is some good old landmine punches, a big staple when it comes to strength and conditioning for striking sports. You're basically performing a resisted punch, and you can load this barbell or this landmine so that you can produce maximal velocity while at the same time having some resistance, but not too much. When you look at Alexander Volkanovski performing those power exercises, one thing you will notice is that he gives maximal effort into each and every repetition. And this is once again a vital piece when you're doing power training. Repeat after me. 100% mental effort on every repetition. This is a part a lot of people get wrong when doing power training. They are simply too slow. If you're slow, you do not recruit the necessary motor units to induce a power adaptation. Another landmine variation here, once again for hip rotational power. Now he's just rotating his hips from side to side and not punching with the landmine. And look at this, he presses the landmine in the middle also, in addition to rotating it. This is to develop arm power. Trap bar jumps, a perfect exercise that is way easier to learn than Olympic weightlifting variations such as the power clean, for example, and the main purpose is power in the triple extension phase, where you extend your ankles, knees and hips. When you're doing a power double leg takedown, for example, or you're extending your body to perform a belly to back throw, many wrestling scenarios or boxing scenarios, MMA scenarios, they require extension of your body, and you need to be powerful in this plane of movement. And once again, look at the intention he has when he jumps. Maximal mental effort on each jump. Also, once again, since he's training for power, the weights are not very high here. It's not the same weight as he would use in a deadlift, so it's pretty moderate in terms of weight. The importance is accelerating the bar as fast as you can, so the weight needs to be light enough for that. And generally trap bars are way more easier to learn than a deadlift. A barbell deadlift has a high margin of error. This is a good option for athletes that do not train in powerlifting. Hip thrusts, heavy and explosive. Hip drive and hip strength is a vital piece in MMA. When you're finishing a takedown, when you're defending a takedown, hip drive is a major staple, not just in MMA actually, but in majority of the sports, and a lot of people underestimate the weight of this. Here we can see once again that he's performing every repetition with maximal mental intention to develop that explosiveness. And here's an interesting plyometric workout that he's doing. Look at this. He's performing vertical jumps with maximal effort, as hard and powerful as he possibly can. And beneath him you have this mat that actually measures the velocity he produces, the power he produces, and the height. This is a very good tool. It's not very available in like most training facilities. It's usually in high-end facilities. But you can see how much power you produce in one day and compare your results day to day. And for example, this is a major staple in velocity-based training, where you measure your velocity in the beginning of every training session so that you can see how fit you are for that day, and this basically determines the intensity and the volume for the remainder of the session in terms of the compound list, for example a deadlift, a back squat and a bench press and all of that. So this is a pretty new training method, and it is very good for measuring results and comparing your results day to day. And of course, aside from all of this, he also performs his accessory exercises. Here we can see him performing some bench rows for horizontal pulling strength. We can see him perform pull-ups for vertical pulling strength. He does the unilateral squat variations here, the split squats, and a bunch of other things. As for his conditioning sessions, here we can see him performing the air bike, and this is an amazing tool for total body conditioning in that it is low in impact. For example, if you're running, you're having impact on every step, and if you're doing some tough MMA workouts on top of that and strength training workouts, it can sometimes be too much. But the air bike is minimal impact and you cover the total body. You're pulling the levers, you're pushing the levers, and you're pedaling with your legs, total body. In addition to that, you have the LCD where you can track your metrics. You can see the power expended, you can see the calories burned, the distance covered, and you can compare your results from day to day and set new benchmarks for yourself. This is difficult with circuit training methods, for example. And he not only does general conditioning methods with the air bikes, he obviously also does sport-specific endurance methods. For example, here we can see him performing resisted shoots in a high tempo to develop that wrestling-specific endurance that is applicable to grappling scenarios in MMA, and a bunch of other stuff. Now I can definitely imagine that when Alexander Volkanovski does his endurance sessions, he focuses on lactic acid capacity, buffering capacity, this anaerobic endurance, you know. Instead of doing like very lengthy and slow and steady state cardio sessions like running for 10 kilometers for example, I can imagine he does a lot of sprints, a lot of tough intervals, he sprints a lot of hills, he does heavy and short and concise rounds of maximal effort that really translates into those MMA scenarios, you know, those tough scrambles, whether it comes to the jiu-jitsu part, the striking parts, quality over quantity basically, high efforts in intervals instead of spreading it out in long and steady state cardio sessions. Now with this video we barely scratched the surface, there's probably a lot more that he's doing, but I hope you learned something new. I am Salman, strength and conditioning coach. I work with athletes from all over the world, online and on-site, and if you're interested in an online coach, just visit my website and send me a message there. Thanks for watching.